Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending. My name's Kate, and I'm filling in for our chair, Kathy Malone, today. We are presenting our June 20th, 2024 R&D committee meeting hosted by Barb Hall, calling Grafting for Climate Resiliency, Consideration of Rootstocks and New Varietals for Transitioning Climates. So thanks, Barb, for coming today. Barb's passion, creativity, and versatility are evident throughout her career in BC's wine industry. She's published 2 scientific papers, one on indigenous yeasts and one on melatonin in Merlot vines, even before completing her BSc in biochemistry at UBC Okanagan. And her work was the foundation for continuing research at UBC. After graduation, Barb gained practical experience at a number of highly regarded Okanagan Valley wineries, including Burrowing Owl Estate Winery, Church and State Wines, and Andrew Peller Limited. Over time, she accepted positions of steadily increasing responsibility as she worked her way up from vineyard crew to chief of operations. Unlike most winemakers, Barbara understands both ferments and wines at a deep level because of her research experience. This knowledge is vital in an industry facing unprecedented challenges due to climate change. Barbara brings her focus to helping Okanagan vineyards and wineries successfully navigate the changing conditions and economic realities. Her work benefits the Okanagan and has broad applications to other regions as well. So Barb's going to be our primary presenter today, and then our Sustainable Wine Growing BC program manager, Ruth King, is going to be facilitating a discussion between Barb and Dr. Jim Wilworth from Brock University, and we'll be happy to take all of your questions at that time as well. So thanks, and over to you, Barb.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Kate said, I started as a winemaker, and now I find myself in research and going back to graduate studies. So thank you, everyone, for taking your time out of the day to listen to the work that Dr. Murch and I are beginning at UBC Okanagan. When I was working for a winery over a year ago, I was tasked with finding some Italian varietals for a new vineyard development. And I had no idea how to go about getting vines from Italy. And so I contacted Dr. Murch, and she helped me with that, the sourcing of it. And in the initial searches for the varietal that I was looking for, we found in the collection a newly developed rootstock that seemed to have a drought resilience to it. And the literature seems to indicate that it has a different stress mechanism for the plant's response. And that, on a level of plant science, was very interesting to me. But it also started me thinking about what it would mean to sustainability in the vineyards. And you have to understand that a year ago, when I was thinking about this, I was coming from working at a winery, being a winemaker, and looking at it. And now, in light of what has happened over the last winter and having the devastating vine loss and vine damage, you know, something that has a mechanism that maybe is different than we've seen before, and maybe can sort of help us be more resilient out in the vineyard in the way that it allows us to recover more quickly, or maybe adjust more easily, because it doesn't even seem like the stress is letting up at all. It's just one thing after another. And, you know, going into a 2024 growing season with drought conditions, all drought protocols already in place, you know, these vines that have survived, how they can't handle any stress this year, and how do we manage that to make sure that they have a vine health that will get them back to producing grapes. And so that really opens up where we're at right now, and the excitement of seeing something new being developed and maybe a potential. But having said that, you know, how do you get something that isn't available to you, hasn't been tested out of Italy, and how do you get it into Canada, and how do you determine whether that's a benefit for the Okanagan? And that really is what the presentation is today. It's about information about that process that we are undertaking, and the process that we'll be undertaking to see the benefit of this rootstock. So Again, it's not about rootstocks. The Pecorino varietal that I'll be talking about and the M4 rootstock is more information about what that process looks like. Maybe the considerations that we need to take in the wine industry as we start to rethink and replant and understand what a future wine industry looks like in the Okanagan, as well as just really understanding how to manage the vines in a future that we can't really foresee. So before we get too far into the future, what I want to do is kind of look at, you know, why we're growing the varietals that we grow. And it really impacts to me that we've come back full circle. So we're really looking at, you know, we're no different than those original growers planting vines in the valley. They're looking at what will grow here. They had the benefit of understanding that we're a cool climate growing region at that time, with other cool climate growing regions that existed in other parts of the world that could help us with those strategies and understand how to manage those vines in a newer climate here in the Okanagan. I don't know if we have that same help. We need to almost think for ourselves, you know, and sort of extrapolate out where we see that going and what's going to work here. So, you know, that's that one difference. And then we also have, why don't we grow different wines? Over the evolution of our industry here, it's kind of grown with a balance of, you know, what the consumer is looking for, what grows here. International winemakers have helped us push those boundaries, and internationally trained growers have helped us sort of push those boundaries as to what grows here and where we're growing it. But again, it's a return on investment, right? So if it's an agribusiness, and that's what we are, we're looking at growers are going to grow what they're going to be able to sell and hopefully get the highest price from. And wineries are going to want the varietals growing that the consumer is looking for, or grown in a way that they're looking for the style of wine that the consumer is looking for. And, you know, we're at a point where we have to really look at what grows best here. And I don't know that answer. I just know that I needed to, you know, be part of that, you know, second question, why don't we grow different wines, when I was working at a winery and thinking about what to introduce here. And then now this becomes a more important question, what will grow best here? You know, what survived over the winter? What is going to survive as the summers become hotter and drier? And we're very fortunate to have irrigation, so at least we can look at that. But if we don't have available in Canada, or we're not able to supply the amount of grapevine material that we need to replant our vineyards, where do new vines come from? And that really is what I want to talk to you today. So if there is new research being done out there, as we're going through this exercise here in the Okanagan, just looking at what's out there, what's possible, you know, and making it become a reality here. And then I kind of touched on this in the way that we have considerations for new plantings. As we've evolved as a wine industry in the Okanagan, specifically here, it really has been about that balance. Is it, you know, the consumer driving the market? Is it the wine growers pushing us into a premium product? And, you know, finding that balance between what grows in the valley, what's going to be sustainable in the valley. And now the question is, what's resilient in the valley, right? How are we going to recover more easily, adjust more easily as our climate transitions in front of us, right? How do we manage our way through that? And so what I think is that that balance is really starting to tip, that scale is really starting to tip towards what grows in the vineyard here, and how we make those changes in the vineyard and how that's going to affect the whole industry. And so just sort of take those considerations as we go through that. What I can speak to is my personal experience and the thought process that I got, because as you are introducing new varietals, then you're going to be introducing possibly a new wine style, and you're going to have to educate a market for wine buyers as to why they're now drinking this wine from the Okanagan. And so at the time, this was my thought process, and I just want to share this as an example, and maybe you know, you can help me with my decision-making processes in the future. But as a winemaker, I was looking at the Pecorino as a wine. I really liked it. It had a wine flavor and a style, a profile that I thought suited the Okanagan. It was, it had good structure. It had a quality to it that I think fit into where the Okanagan was, and it had a flexibility in the way that you could make it into an aged white wine or a sparkling white wine. And so I didn't think that was too far of a stretch. if I was going to introduce a new varietal to the Okanagan for like how that would be too difficult to sell. So that's great. As a winemaker, you can dream as big as you want to dream, and you can work as hard as you want with as much patches and as you can to make that a reality. But I also had to be responsible in that decision. So I was looking at, okay, so Pecorino is something that I want. Is that something that is actually viable here? Is that something that could be suitable in the vineyards? And so looking at that, Pecorino is an ancient cultivar from the Marquette region. Forgive me, Simone, if you're listening for the pronunciations. But again, that in itself was really interesting to me because I love a survivor story. So something that's lasted for a very long time, probably been through a couple of stress events in its own right. So that was intriguing to me. Also in the region, the Marquette region, there's hot and dry conditions as well as cold and snow. And I don't know how many regions in the world actually parallel what we experience here in the Okanagan. So that at least was a little bit promising that it had been exposed to cold temperature and snow before, but could also sustain hot and dry. And then the other thing that I had to consider was susceptibility to disease and adverse conditions. And in general, it's not susceptible to disease and and adverse conditions. So a lot of this made me think that, it wasn't such a bad thing to call Dr. Murch and start the process. And this would be something that we could introduce to the consumer for the winery that I was working at the time. So we had to go to Italy. Italy isn't a source of propagative grapevine material permitted by Canada. So we had to go through a little bit more of an extra step. And again, what I want to show you is that if you can't find what you're looking for in Canada, if you can't find it where we do permit importation from, then this is just, some of the things that you have to consider as you're going through and looking for something that you do want to source from elsewhere. So find a source. So we found a source. It took about 3 months of organization and conversations and understanding that this is something that we wanted. That took money, obviously, to purchase the clones. Also, please be aware, they don't take a credit card, so just be prepared for that sort of level of organization of transferring of funds. And then, of course, you have to buy a CFIA import permit. So that took a little bit money. Really good thing about that, a good note that the permit was valid for a year because it took a little bit of time for the vines to be ready to be shipped to Canada. And of course, that first shipment now came in at about 6 months before they arrived in Canada. They went directly to the CFIA for the testing. And so that is a year now to that process, just from understanding what we wanted to how to get it here. If it takes so much time and so much money, Barb, why are you going from Italy? Well, there's something there in it from me that the Romans were pretty good about spreading vines across Europe. And so those vines were in Italy before they even went to France. And so that was something that I really wanted to see of a diversity of varietals and clones. There's a wealth of knowledge there, I think, and also the ancient cultivars, like I said, over the time been selected and adapted, and they're still growing. So where did we get it from? In Italy, we got it from the Vivae Cooperative Rootstock. And this place is amazing. So they've been grape breeders since 1969 and hold the largest number of clone selection. They have 22.5 hectares dedicated to research to develop and offer the most innovative knowledge in viticulture. So again, this is in Italy. This is outside of what we've been sourcing from, but there's a whole other knowledge that's out there. And again, how we found it was with a partnership with Upper Canada Growers. They have a partnership there. And if you're not familiar with the Upper Canada Growers, I believe they have a relationship with Maury Vines. And I know that we've bought some vines from Maury in the Okanagan here. This is how the vines arrived from Italy. This is the safest way for vines to arrive in Canada to protect the vines that we have currently here. This is in tissue culture. There's 10 vines there of the cutest little pecorino vines that you've ever seen. And they are now currently at the CFIA, the plant health facility in Sydney, BC. So if everything goes right, the first lab-based test that these vines will undergo, it takes about 3 weeks. Now you can see how small those vines were, so we needed to wait for them to grow a little bit so that they had the right type of material, and then we needed to wait for some of the testing to begin on that. So it took a little bit longer than the 3 weeks. Overall, it was explained to me that this could be like a 4-year process. By the time that you have all the plants grown up, you go through the bioassays and the final virus elimination to assure that you have clean tissue. So again, there's the time commitment on that, and the risk associated with importing outside of a permitted source is that if they find any of the pathogens or the viruses that are regulated in Canada, then that material will be destroyed. So again, just bear in mind, but again, these are the steps that they'll go through. And then if you don't have the stomach for that amount of time, and commitment to sourcing, then you could potentially, we are able to import from United States. You will still need the CFIA permit. You will need to source your vines from a US a nursery that has a US state certification program in place. And you will need to organize for a custom broker and make sure that and have a CFIA inspection of the material once it arrives in Canada. I know that there are Italian varietals available from different nurseries. I just specifically wanted something. So again, I don't do anything the easy way. But again, you have also the option of France and Germany, again, if you're not finding exactly what you're looking for. And on the CFIA website, they have listed sources there for you to search for a search through to see what's available to you from that. I did note that Germany was quite limited, so just again, go to the website, see what's there, and start that process for your own self that way. And this is where we're at right now. So we're just finishing the initial tests at the CFIA, and one of the benefits of being a university with the capacity for quarantine is that we're able to be eligible for early provisional release. So we took that 4-year process and we'll take it down to about a 2-year process. So once we get those vines to the University of we'll be able to begin testing, and that'll and propagating concurrently while the CFIA is finishing their protocols and releasing the material. So that helps a lot to us. Again, there's the money involved in all of that, but we will be propagating those vines up to 250 clones and beyond in order to make sure that we have the materials for the research. So this is the benefit right now, is that we as a university, before we can do all those preliminary tests to see if it is suitable to the Okanagan before a commercial producer even has to take that risk for themselves too, right? And then again, I had the discussion of the pecorino was what I was originally sourcing. And, I've made that decision based on the taste, the seasonality, consumer preferences, vineyard management, looking at that availability. My question was going to be how to get it from 10 vines coming over and how to get it up to, the 1,500 vines that I needed to plant the acre that I was going to plant. And then again, there is still a little bit of that risk with that disease susceptibility, even though it didn't seem to be susceptible in Italy. Who knows what's in Canada, right? So that's where the benefit of a rootstock really comes in. And I had already planned to graft, but after this last winter, I really started to think about if we have the right tools in place. And so, you've got the rootstock here, which is bred for disease and nematode resistance, so it can help you in a different way. We can look at drought resistance or drought tolerance. You can look at salt tolerance and everything like that. So there's an added level of benefit to putting a rootstock on your scion. And then, of course, the ease of management. So there's some sort of influence through the rootstocks that can help moderate the growth and vigor, as well as making sure that you're within the time timing of the season to ripen fully. But now looking at it after the winter, just looking at the few options that we have in Canada and really starting to think about whether they still suit us. I don't know that. That's where the bulk of the information or the research that we're going to begin is going to do. But even, there's Canada, and the Okanagan is only part of it. It's not the same, right? So what are those options that are most suited to the Okanagan, and have we done that work in the Okanagan specifically to make sure that we're building that resilience into our vineyards? And so that brings us to the rootstock part of it. And this is a very real image from this year where you have the rootstock pushing through, but thankfully there's some Pinot Noir there above the graft. And then here's what the rootstock looked like. So we've got nine M4s that have arrived in Canada. So this is amazing. I'm pretty excited about it. And there they are. And now you're wondering, why are you so excited about the M4 rootstock? Well, I'll tell you, the most rootstocks that we have, with the 3309, it's a crossing, right? It's a crossing of the Vitis riparia and the Vitis rupestris. And what you see here immediately is this is a triple crossing. So you've taken the Vitis vinifera, you've crossed it with the Vitis berlandieri, and then you've crossed it again with the cultivar of that Vitis berlandieri. And something that I wanted to note is that the berlandieri is very drought tolerant, and it can also tolerate very low winter temperatures. The other thing about the M4 that I found really unique is that its soil adaptability for dry, pebbly, or sandy soils is something that I think should be considered for the Okanagan. I think there's a lot of sandy soils out there. And I think they're in a position to replant soon. So yeah, so this is something, maybe this is a tool that they can utilize there, right? And also at the Rushido, in the field observations, it was observed that they restrain the production and vigor in order to favor accumulation of sugar, anthocyanin, and polyphenols. Again, putting on that winemaker cap sort of thing, that indicates to me that we're going to have a quality of fruit that's produced using this rootstock. And also, after working in the South Okanagan, maintaining just a little bit of those acidities would be amazing to me, just giving me peace of mind going into harvest with a little bit of that acidity to protect the freshness of the fruit. And then, of course, I mentioned in the literature, so this is the most interesting part to me, and what I can't really wait, to get to understanding what's happening in this rootstock, is that it showed increased water use efficiency and less susceptible to photosynthetic down regulation at peak of water stress compared to a drought tolerant rootstock. And that there, if we talk about having to feed water to get through these heat events, and then now you have a rootstock that's been developed that has, increased water use efficiency and doesn't shut down. And that's what we're trying to prevent when we're watering through these heat events. Really just sort of understanding what's happening in that plant and understanding it from that level, and maybe even taking that knowledge back and applying it to the tools that we currently have and how to use them a little bit more responsibly. Then now in the process, once we get it into the lab, once we start that research, there's another stage to that, right? So you've got to test under the Okanagan conditions. You've got to make sure that we have those field and pathogens testings completed, and then you need to be able to scale up those vines to a level that makes sense for the industry. And so at some point it will be turned over to a commercial producer, and it really will depend on the scale of operation that commercial producer can ramp up to, and obviously the demand of the vineyards. If this is a benefit to the Okanagan, then how much do we need to supply to the vineyards being replanted out there? And then of course all of that, those grape growers and those professionals and winemakers and everything, they've got to see the benefit of it as well. And that'll only come from when we start to harvest those grapes and make the wines from those grapes. So where are the vines going after they leave the CFIA? This is where they're coming. They're coming to the Plant Smart Lab. Dr. Murch's lab was established at the UBCO Okanagan in 2005. We have over 35 crops, including grapevines, that we study. We are looking at new drought-tolerant rootstocks. We have a controlled environment production, so we have a tissue culture room that we're able to propagate this material and start the analysis on. Also, we are a CFIA approved for provisional release and quarantine, so we take that 4 years down to about a 2-year process, like I said, where we can start the research and make sure that this is a benefit to the Okanagan. Not only do we have the access to, we also had the access to the UBC Okanagan plant growth facility that was opened in 2021. It's a 5,000 square foot plant growth facility. They have controlled environment chambers, soil sterilization facilities, and 4 climate zones. So also, again, part of that puzzle is wherever those vines are going, it has to be approved by the CFIA as having the quarantine protocols in place to make sure that we protect the vines that we already have in Canada and that we're not introducing anything new to it. And then again, how do we get from 10 vines to enough to do our research on? So that's where we're going to be using plant cell and tissue culture in order to build up the amount of plants that we're able to use. And we're exploiting what the plants have is the totipotency. So every plant cell has the potential to grow into a whole plant. And just to, if you haven't heard of that tissue culture before, just to give you an idea of the scale that it's used in plant propagation. So most major crops are produced through tissue culture, and over 3 billion plants per year are produced through tissue culture. So we don't have that scale. I'm just giving you an idea that this is a standard operation for plant propagation. So it'll be something that we're going to do to make sure that we can do the work that we want to begin. But one note that I do want to say is in tissue culture, there is another way to do grafting, and it's a micrografting in vitro. And if you look at grafting for field grafting, that takes about 2 to 3 years to turn around that material. With micrografting in vitro, it's about 3 to 4 months to start to produce those plants. So really, again, we've taken that 4 years down to 2 years to even just trying to ramp up with the new technique that Dr. Murch has in the Plant Smart Lab. And that's a new technique I'm going to be learning as well. So I'm very excited about that. And then again, it is a process. So we've gone through the green steps. So we found a source all the way through to the CFIA. And now where we're at is bringing the vines to the UBC Okanagan, and that'll begin the next part of that where we begin the research. And then again, just to illustrate that it's an ongoing process, the next steps that we have to do after we're done the work that we've done at the university. And now what I really want to do is just end the talk on with a photo of an over 50-year-old Pinot Roxua vine at Little Straw Vineyards. When I was working there, this was one of my favorite blocks. And just looking at building that resilience into the vineyards now, so that we have a chance to grow vines for the next 50 years again. And on that note, I'd like to thank everyone, Dr. Murch, for this opportunity that's in front of us here, for the co-researchers in the lab at Plant Smart, and for all the support that they give as we set up a new project. And also thank Upper Canada's growers and the Rootstock, and also for the funding bodies that have contributed to the research that we've been able to do in the lab this far. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barb. I would love to offer the opportunity to drop any questions that listeners have into the chat, and I'll try to organize them and deliver them in a cohesive manner. But I did have some thoughts and some questions of my own, so I'll get that started before anybody else. I don't think anybody's had a chance to drop anything in the chat just yet. So in all this time, like, I know that rootstocks weren't really a thing until phylloxera, which was, you know, the mid 1800s. So say 1850. I guess more of a comment that I just want to make is I think we've gone a long time not really needing to do some hard, you know, investigative research in the realm of rootstocks. And so for 175 years, let's say, we've had all this experience with, you know, rootstocks, and the challenges just haven't, I guess, been as extreme. And we've been, I don't want to say complacent, but we just haven't had to work that hard. So I guess I'm wondering, is that the reason that we don't have more of a handle on rootstock and scion interaction and all those complexities, and really knowing what is appropriate for, you know, what soil, what variety, what, you know, what purpose, and just having more of a selection? Do you think that there's any more there's any more to it, or is it just that we've been kind of okay here in North America?
I don't know if Jim wants to take that. Again, I'm just starting my studies in rootstock, but it's always been something that's fascinated me, just because it, you know, we look at what's above the ground, and I don't know if we've always considered what's below the ground, and it's only half of the plant that we see above the ground, right? And, you know, something that I've thought about is, well, you know, how, you know, in the winter when there's nothing above the ground, what's happening under the ground, right? How does it know to start again? Where are those cues coming from and everything like that? And so, you know, if you haven't had to really consider it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? It's all about timing at that point. I think we've been managing our vines for managing the stress, but I don't think we have that opportunity anymore that we're managing the stress. I think the climate is presenting that stress to the vines, and I think now it's about how to manage those vines through for health and continued production. And so maybe that's where we're at right now, is just looking at that, the decisions that we've made. I think along the way, things have developed. We just haven't taken advantage of some of those new developments, and that's what I just wanted to present today. So again, I see some of Hans' questions coming up and everything like that. This is all very new. Right now, this is a research project. Right. I can tell you the whole process, so that people, as they start to go through what they want to do for their properties and their wineries, that what they need to consider, the timelines that they need to consider for planning. But again, this is new. And for me, at this point where I'm at, seeing something that has a new mechanism and just really looking at that, and maybe we can take that knowledge and apply it back to what's already available, right? Maybe we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe there's just some new knowledge that's going to make us understand what we have in front of us a little bit more. And that's really the point of the presentation today. I think it's something that we've been dancing around in the industry, is that we don't know how long it's going to take, right? And we don't know exactly what to put into the ground. So I'm just throwing another perspective into that for everyone to consider.
Perfect. Yes, love that. One question that Hans added in here is the M4 rootstock proprietary?
Yeah, so I saw that come up. And again, you know, those are things that need to be sorted out. You know, I don't know. That's another pay level right now. It'll be part of the project, absolutely. But again, the first step right now is getting it here and really understanding, if it's not been tested outside of Italy, if it's suitable for the Okanagan.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any other questions here, but I do have some more questions for you on, and for Jim, if he's interested. If we don't know what we have for rootstock, can we just take scion material and send that? This might be a really simple question, but can we just take scion material and send it in? Can you figure it out for us that way? Or do we need to what do we have to do?
I don't, oh, if you don't know the rootstock that's on the vine right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know how to answer that question. Can Jim answer that question better than?
Do we need to dig and snip and mail that into Brock? Like, what would we do to go, what would be the process to just figure out what we even have right now?
Well, if you have leaves, you just do amplography and look at what the leaves are, and you could tell what the rootstock is. So if you are getting some rootstock suckering,
Okay.
you can even send a photo my way and I could tell you probably what it is.
Okay.
But there's probably some ways you can get it tested. I don't know if we're at the point of being able to test rootstocks at Brock here yet. We're
Okay.
developing new techniques to identify vine material and hopefully get the clonal identification as well. But there's probably services out there that you can find that can identify what rootstock it is by the tissue. But yeah.
Okay, perfect. And I see Susan, you have your hand up.
Yes, Susan.
Hi. So at the Sydney Research Station on Vancouver Island, if you just take a snip of the rootstock, they can run AFLPs and they can do the molecular testing and they can tell you what it is. Some of them we can identify by form. So if you are pulling out, because they grow differently, right? And so you can get a good guess based on form if it's one of the common ones. But really, if you just send a small piece of tissue to Sydney, they'll give you an answer fairly quickly. And I don't think it's an expensive test through their Clean Plant network.
Okay. So that is root tissue to Sydney. Got it. Another question I have is, Barb or Jim, in your travels, in your research and mining of data, did you find any other rootstocks that we should be experimenting with or bringing into BC? M4.
Oh, well, yeah, so the M4 was an example today, and that was just serendipitously found in a collection where we were bringing the pecorino from. But I always have questioned why we use the rootstocks that we use in the Okanagan, because the soils are very different. And again, I think that just comes from understanding how to grow vines for managing stress, and maybe there's been an ease of that management with the current rootstocks. In the past, you can go back, I think, and this isn't research knowledge or anything anymore, but, drought tolerant rootstocks or some of those other ones, there was always a question whether they would convey too much vigor to the vines. So again, you have to really, so there's research and there's knowledge, and then there's what we work with out in the field too, right? So just really bridging those knowledge gaps, I think. And I think, as terrible as what happened, it at least opens up the conversation if there's different ones now, and then maybe Jim can add to that, but that's just my experience as a winemaker and wine grower, and then now where I'm at right now.
Yeah, we're on that quest of searching for different rootstocks ourselves in Ontario, and our needs in Ontario or in Nova Scotia or Quebec are going to be different than BC's. Particularly, we have to be really concerned with phylloxera where we are. We're in phylloxera's backyard in Ontario. So, if I look at M4 and I see vinifera in its background, there's no way I would want that one here. But in BC, it's very suitable. It could be very suitable. And so I think it's really worthwhile to study a rootstock like that. So we do have different needs in our different regions across Canada, but as a whole, I think across Canada, we need to be taking these initiatives. And so, we're doing some parallel type of work in Ontario at Brock. So it's really cool to, see what's happening nationally and regionally at the moment to deal with this. So you know, but it's funny is when I looked at, you know, the common rootstocks here in Ontario and I look at the common rootstocks in BC, I'm like, well, why? There's a lot of parallels there, but our regions are quite different with respect to soils, different pest pressures, you know, in terms of phylloxera pressure or nematodes. It's a lot different than in our regions, or can be a lot different in our regions. So our rootstock needs should be, you know, it would make sense that our rootstock needs would be different and not so similar. But there's some that, like right now, I find a lot of the rootstocks we do use are very common ones that are kind of generalists, right? They're overall pretty good, but they might not be the best ones in terms of certain things. And one thing that I learned after a really tough winter, and this is something that, you know, you guys can think of in BC after a tough winter, because you don't see these things unless it's been a really difficult cold event or a really big drought event or something like that. Then you start to see some of these differences with these different genotypes, whether it's different clones or rootstock. So if you're in your vineyards and if you've been taking inventory, if you see like one part of a block that looks really good and another one that's not, you know, just look at the clone, the rootstock, and maybe it's related to those. And that's where we started to look at it like a starting point for at least selection of plant material for better winter hardiness. And that's how we started to investigate rootstocks for cold hardiness. And now even different clones that we're looking at in our region, you know, for our core varieties, you know, like Chardonnay, Pinot, Riesling, Cab Franc, Sauvignon Blanc even. And so it's been helpful to get a starting point. But overall, and I'll go back to one of the very first questions, and, you know, with respect to, you know, rootstocks were developed out of the need to deal with phylloxera. And then what's happened since then? And yeah, it has been I think some complacency. You know, we developed a lot of rootstocks, but since then it's only been regionally specific for a lot of the breeding that's been going on, and for really specific needs in that region. But I've repeated this probably to you before, but like when Hans Schultz from Geisenheim gave his, you know, merit lecture for ASEV, and he finished with basically talking about dealing with climate change, and there needs to be a global effort in rootstock breeding and selection to deal with the climate crisis. And I really take that to heart. I really think that we do need more initiatives like this. What's happening at UBC Okanagan and what we're doing here at Brock and other areas, and really build on that and and I think that's where the future is going to be. I think rootstocks have play a big role in the future, and evaluate what we can. You know, we've been trying some different rootstocks from California. It's like, yeah, this will never work here. And after the first couple of years of study, yeah, we've had some vines that died, didn't even make it through the first winter. And now we have other ones where like never thought it would do well here. And it's actually some of the more winter hardy. But you do have to look at vigor, winter hardiness, drought tolerance, production too. Like we find Vitis riparia can work well for us. We have usually a lot of water. We don't, and so, you know, being a shallow rooted vine is not going to be very drought tolerant, and you're going to sacrifice yields with riparia, but it can be more winter hardy. So you just that compromise, right? Anyways,
Yeah,
I've talked to you.
It's such a complex situation, and I tuned into the CGCN webinar with Tom Forge and yourself, Jim, and I see Tom's on the call here today as well. I really liked the point that was made that the rootstock and soil compatibility is probably the more important piece, but also considering, you know, what your, you know, nutrient load or, you know, management practice is, and which probably goes back to, you know, the prior use of the land, if it was a feedlot versus, you know, pasture or whatever. The other thing is just your production goals, like that, you know, winemaker's perspective, that does matter, right? Like what is your, you know, what is your brand, what is viable in your market and things like that. So, yeah, I thought that was all super interesting. And I also, another thing I took from that webinar was that the, you know, rootstock is going to play a huge part, and the soil and these things that we haven't necessarily been too focused on until, you know, the last recent decade here, when we're really like trying to navigate all the changes. But things like cover cropping, things like rootstock, things underground that we haven't been really looking at. You know, we think about like managing vigor and we're thinking water, but there's so much more to that. And just, you know, managing your harvest volumes and things like that. Like it all starts with what's underground. And so we really need to zoom in on that, I think. And as an adaptation strategy for climate change, I think it's going to be super important. So I think that your work is super cool. And I do see one more message here in the chat. So David from Genome BC, as you import new plant materials, roots and scions, have you considered linking genomics or genotype with the performance in your research program?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're not at a point where we can just look at it from one perspective anymore. We have a very complex situation that's unfolding in BC, right? And just really, you know, getting to what we need to know in a short time. I think definitely we have to look at it from different approaches and really start to build a bigger picture than what we're used to in research. We can't just look at one thing and, you know, piece it together over time. I think we really, like, you know, Jim, let's work together. You know, different things like that, like just really start to understand like what Okanagan requires versus what Ontario requires, how it looks like nationally across Canada, like, you know, bring everyone into that conversation, because that's just more voices and more perspectives that we can really help. You know, I think this winter made us feel kind of like, you know, it just happened to us and that we're all alone in this sort of thing. But there's a lot of people that have gone through similar things, and just really understanding the strategies that they've developed that maybe we haven't heard and that we can hear now because we've gone through it. So yeah, so I think genomics plays a big role in it. I think metabolomics plays a big role in it. I think hormonal, I can't even say it, but even looking at growth regulators and hormones and how they interplay, all those reactions within a plant. I think we have to take the vine and rootstock out of it and start looking at it from a plant perspective. And what's going to grow in the climate. And so maybe that's even just like a wider mindset that we have to approach the situation that we're in with. Did that answer the question? I'm sorry.
I think so. And then the other thing that kind of was always in the back of my mind in, you know, the various webinars and things since I've been tuning into, you know, Canadian viticulture is it's very different from California viticulture, which is where I started my career. And one thing that's super common down there that I don't see a lot of here is field grafting and propagating at the farm level. And I know we have lots of concerns about virus and you know, other pathogens and things, but I just wonder if I always worry about, you know, we've got all this, you know, replanting going on in the future in the next, you know, few years here, probably for the next decade. And do we have the supply that we need of plant material? Should we be, you know, from the ministry perspective or our organizations in the industry, should we be looking to educate people more on propagation? You know, we don't have a big window for field grafting. I understand that, which we do in California, but you know, should people be throwing up a little hoop house and starting their own grafting kind of little projects and propagative projects? Or do you think there's just way too much risk there? I mean, it's something that every farmer does in California. So I'm just wondering what everybody's thoughts are.
My thoughts are we have to follow what's happening with CGCN and make sure that we have a good, sound, clean plant program.
Yeah.
And I think if there's, you know, rebels here and there trying to propagate things and it just becomes a real mess, I think we have to make sure that the material is clean to start with, that's being used for propagation and moving out to vineyards. And it starts with that process. And if we don't follow that process, we're setting ourselves up for failure. And yeah, we need vines, but that's what That's where institutions like Brock and CGCN and CFIA, UBC Okanagan, we're all working to build up the repositories and the material that can be available. That's everything from scion to rootstock. And that's a collaborative effort, a national effort. That's my thought on that.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, so you've heard it here. Don't try this at home, folks. That's the take-home message there. Does anyone have any idea about the supply of clean plants? Like, I know CGCN has, I believe, 5 nurseries that are certified at the moment. I'm just wondering, like, what, do we have a few million a year that, we can count on? What are we looking at? And is it even remotely close to what we have as a demand? Nobody knows, huh?
Can I ask a question to your question? Do we know what we've pulled out? Do we know the extent of the loss, what people will be replanting? I know there was a survey that went out. Are we starting to get a bigger picture of what we're looking at needing?
I think that we are trying really hard to get that information. I think that there's still a lot that is uncertain. And from what I've seen come back from that survey, it's a large number of acres that need to be replanted, but I don't know how urgent some of these replantings are. Like, I don't know how we can prioritize it and say, like, okay, we're going to need, X million plants per year for the next 5 years or something like that. So I think there's still a lot of, we just need to take a great grape census and find out what's going on, what's alive, what do people want to grow, what should we grow, and make all these decisions. But it's kind of all, everything, all these factors are kind of hitting us all at once. So it's really quite a perfect storm.
The other question that I have to you, sorry, you're probably wanting to ask questions here. How do we go about organizing that information then? Like, if people, this is the process that I just outlined is, time and money invested into it. And so, is that something that if we have funding, research, money, are we going to pool together and make a test block, or, start to organize some of this research in a focused way that's going to benefit the growers in, just in light of what's just happened, sort of thing, right? Because that's how we started in the Okanagan in the early days, is we had those test blocks and really just assessing. And I think Summerland's been going, they still have some test blocks. And, now is there, a future test block that can sort of really look at climate effects, and I think that's where we get to. So we can take a census as to what we've lost and what we need to replace. But rather than everyone trying to problem solve for themselves, if there's a way that we can organize, that think tank, or just get an understanding, or, have a conference or a meeting or something like that. So yeah, as I just saw Tom's comment there with the new Becker project, I that's why I mentioned that in the talk, is I think we have come full circle. I don't think we're in a point that we can make decisions without really understanding what's in front of us.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think there's probably a giant research proposal that, we need to have, like, a collaborative effort going for, some rootstock and even clonal. We didn't talk much about that today, but I think there's so much clonal variation. Like, we've got five clones of Pinot Noir up the hill, and they perform vastly differently. That wasn't great English, but they're very different with respect to their flavor profiles, their characteristics, their hardiness, their everything. So I think it's probably a really, really big, expensive project, but I'd love to help steer that committee and get that off the ground, because there's really a lot more research that needs to be done, especially in these volatile places like British Columbia and Canada, where, it's a massive industry. Like, dollar-wise. You know, we bring in 4 million in BC, or 4 billion in BC, and 12 billion in Canada, I think, was the last figure I saw. But you know, so we do need to take care of that and be responsible, I think. Tyrion, I see your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I hesitate to say anything because I don't know the details, but there was, through the original idea of the replant program, I think from 2023 in phase 2, because there are 3 phases, I think there was money available to growers or wineries who wanted to do some of that kind of research. Kate, do you have more detail on that? But there definitely there is definitely talk about encouraging small projects on farm, and maybe that's something we can also add to the discussion at the Wine Grape Industry Task Force. There's a real opportunity for the industry to come together and talk about these in a much broader, much bigger context, and maybe access some provincial money to make it happen. That would be my.
Yeah, I like that idea. I just think that you know, in general, farmers are great experimenters and very innovative. They do try to, you know, test and play around. I don't know how much more I want to ask of them these days. There's just so much pressure, and to say, hey, we want you to spearhead this research project. I think there's probably some people with lighter mental loads that could probably take that on for them, you know, for the next few years anyway. But I do love the idea of lots of experimenting and research. And I'm not sure about Summerland. Do we have anybody from Summerland here? Just looking at the list. I don't think so. But I think they would be great to engage as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Tom is here, yeah. But I don't see Benman. Tom, what say you?
Yeah, yeah, I'm here from Summerland. I guess I'm the only one who's online from Summerland. But yeah, plans for, certainly there'd be interest, and Summerland would be a great place to establish some sort of trials, you know, systematically, that could be carried out for a number of years, where you have a lot of different things carefully chosen, planted all in the same place. You know, there's a benefit to moving things around different locations as well, but having some sort of core study to evaluate it, Summerland would be ideal. And there has been work done in the past. Back in the early 90s, there was a rootstock trial here, and it's no longer here, but it was papers were published on it, and you know, characterizing responses of all of the main rootstocks that we currently are using. That was done then, and yeah, so there's a need, and it could be done. But
yeah, sounds good. I think
there isn't currently anything going though. So.
Yeah, I think there's probably a need to have a variety of plots, which is where the, you know, the idea of having growers have little experiments and like the living lab kind of concept is really beneficial. But perhaps more extension work and taking that burden off of the growers themselves. And, you know, they might have some fallow fields for the next little while, like perhaps, you know, through the ministry or other groups, we can fund a project like that would use some of their land so that we can get that variety of soil, that variety of, you know, climate and location, but not necessarily make more work for them.
Yeah.
Lots of ideas, and I'd love to hash that out thoroughly. I just want to thank everybody. We are just about at time here. I wanted to thank everybody today, Barb, for your presentation, and Jim and Tom for contributing to the discussion, and Susan as well. And our next R&D third Thursday is July 18th, and we'll be discussing irrigation planning. So I hope everybody has a great weekend, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.